Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS and in partnership with Vertical Valley Magazine. In this two-part series, guest co-host Terry Miyauchi and I talked to prior Japanese Coast Guard pilot Hajime Sagane.
Yeah, I saw a lot of bodies in the ocean. So next day of the earthquake, I was dispatched to the Kamaishi area, which is the Iwate prefecture, north side of the Fukushima, north side of Sendai. And then I saw a lot of debris on the ocean. First body was, it was like a Japanese elementary school student wearing the same backpack, having the same backpack. The girls, most of the case, girls are having a red backpack, and the boys are black backpack. And we found that backpack on the ocean.
Jimmy speaks excellent English, but for the best experience, we recommend watching this episode on our HeliCASTS YouTube page to enjoy the benefits of closed captioning. During our conversation, Jimmy recounts the historic and tragic events that unfolded after a 9.0 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan on March 11th of 2011. This devastating quake triggered a massive tsunami that claimed over 20,000 lives and critically damaged the Fukushima nuclear power plant's cooling system. Jimmy shares gripping first-hand accounts of the heroic efforts during Japan's 2011 earthquake and tsunami, including the challenges of search and rescue missions, the use of helicopters in cooling efforts, and the emotional weight of recovery work. Join us as we dive into a compelling conversation about resilience, preparedness, and the dedication of those who serve in public safety aviation. Thank you to our sponsors, Spectralab, Wysong Enterprises, and Robinson Helicopter Company.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
Jimmy, for you going back to Fukushima and what had taken place, can you talk a little bit more about the reactors, what had happened to the reactors, and what your role was as a pilot and what the role was of the Coast Guard in responding to that?
So March 11, 2011, we had a big earthquake and northern coast of Japan, and Fukushima. We have a Fukushima nuclear power plant, which is I think one of the biggest nuclear power plant in Japan. And the tsunami hit that reactor, and of course the nuclear power plant have an emergency generator or other emergency cooling system. But all of the emergency the system was swept away by the tsunami. So there are no, backup cooling system or no backup generator. That's why the reactor had a core meltdown, experienced core meltdown. There are a lot of lot of radioactive was leaked from the reactor. And after the earthquake, the government decided to have a cooling mission by the fire trucks. So the fire truck was heading to the reactor, but they realized that radiation amount is too high. So they cannot get into the reactor area from the ground. But the helicopter, they can fly over the reactor because it has an airspeed, and also they can evacuate right after they drop the water. Radioactive situation is the problem is that you cannot stay a long time. It's the oil radioactive is start. How to say?
Oh, the gradual exposure?
Gradual exposure, right? So the government said maybe helicopter can be minimized the cruise exposure of the radioactive. So the government decided to use a helicopter, and ground self-defense force, two Chinook was dispatched for the cooling mission. And then they drop the water from the Bambi bucket. The amount of the water was like 30 tons. Total was 30 tons. So it's not big amount, but it's enough amount to cool down the reactor. Because, all of the water inside the reactor was evaporated already. Mm-hmm. So there are almost no water inside the reactor pool. So that's why they want to put in the water to cool down the nuclear fuel or something like that. But 30 tons is enough, amount to cool down the reactor.
Do you know, were there any instruments in place after the tsunami came through to accurately measure the temperatures inside the reactor, so that the folks that were, I guess, in charge of these operations could see whether or not these drops were effective?
Before the CH-47 water drop mission, the UH-60 Black Hawk with the thermal
imaging?
Thermal air is fly over to the reactor, and they check the temperature of the reactors.
Okay.
Before their mission. And also, I think the F-15 with some kind of atmosphere air collector or something. I forgot the name of their English, but they fly over to the nearby the reactor. Then they collect the air around the nuclear power plant. Then they analyze that, how much radioactive is there. So before the mission, they did that kind of reconnaissance mission.
In your outline that I saw, it looks like there was the first attempt to drop water was aborted. It looks like because the radiation levels were too high. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the first attempt was aborted because of the radiation high. And also the wind direction is a very big problem to do the mission. And the first mission, I believe the wind always blow from the south to north. It means, the coastline was faced to the east side. So when we had a window from the south to north, the radio convention is brought to the north, right? It means and we have the mountain area, the west side and the north side. So it's really hard to approach from the north side, and not difficult, but I think from the coastline is really difficult to approach from the north side. So first attempt was the radiation high, and they aborted. And it's because of the wind. My understanding is because of the wind direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like there was a difference in altitude as well.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Also the altitude was there. I think the first attempt was there.
Yeah, it looks like the first attempt, the altitude was 100 feet.
100 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, and the second one was 300 feet.
300 feet. Yeah.
So just the difference in altitude made a difference as far as the radiation that was detected on the Geiger.
Right.
And I guess that's let me throw a question in there. I looked and saw some of the photos of the protective equipment that was worn during these missions. Can you talk about that, the protective equipment, and then also some of the equipment that was used to measure the radiation?
Okay. So the old pilot wear lead armors and the gas mask to protect the radioactive. And also before the mission, all the pilot and crew took the iodine tablet. And to measure the radioactive, we bring the gamma ray dosimeter and the neutron dosimeter. And for the helicopter, we don't much have a good protective measure. So we use a lot of a duct tape or to fill in the gap of the, aircraft. We haven't prepared this kind of a nuclear disaster. That's why, all of the major thing is we have to think very in the short time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not something most people plan for, and have equipment on hand for is a release of nuclear material. Looking at the photos, you talk about the crew equipment for the cooling mission, the lead armor, the nylon protective gear, and the gas mask. And looking at that, it looks very restrictive. Can you talk about what it was like to fly with all that protective equipment on?
One of the Japan Ground Defense Force pilot told me that the gas mask was like a binocular type. So it's really, affect the view from the cockpit. And also maybe you guys use their ICS, the headset to communicate with it. But on the gas mask, there are no mic in the gas mask. So the pilot couldn't have any communication tools at the cockpit. The pilot told me that was the most difficult thing to operate the mission, to do the mission. Because basically the pilot cannot communicate each other.
Yeah.
So they just use the hand sign to communicate during the mission.
When you think about, as a pilot, a lot of what we do is focused around our ability to communicate, to give instruction and receive instruction. So imagine that was really difficult for that pilot and that crew to operate in that environment, kind of in the blind, if you will. Really interesting.
Yeah, actually they do have a mic with a headset inside the gas mask, but the voice was, it's really hard to hear to the other pilot. Is a co-pilot. So that's why they try to use a hand sign.
Jimmy, in reading your report, there was a couple standouts. This first mission was to cool the reactor only, and the radiation levels were too high to do any search and rescue in the area, and it was to cool the reactors only. And what I read was that water drops was actually the turning point. It actually did cool the reactors and had that radiation to start turning the opposite direction. It had the effect they were successful with those helicopters, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then they could start to look for the search and rescue or look for the levels to conduct the search and rescue missions after that point. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then how long, I think, did I read this right? It took another 30 days before the levels would be low enough to where you could actually go in there and start doing the search and rescue missions?
Yeah, actually, months later from the disaster, we start the search and rescue mission around the nuclear power plant. But because for the search and rescue mission, the Coast Guard did that. We did that for the search and rescue mission. And then we don't have the lead armor on that time. So we only have a fabric protected gear. That's why we need to wait until the certain amount of the radioactive level to decrease the certain amount of the radioactive level. So that's why it takes 1 month after the disaster to start a search and rescue mission.
The reason I asked that, I just can't believe. We think 3 minutes, 3 hours is a long time to launch on a known search and rescue in 30 days. I totally understand the why in this case, but wow. That's just amazing.
After that 30-day period had taken place and you actually started the search and rescue operations, can you talk about, what some of your successes were and what you experienced doing that?
Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com.
We have 3 VSOLs and 2 fixed wing and 3 helicopters in the search and rescue mission. But after I think we have 2 flight, 2 hours and 2 hours, 2 hours for each. So we have a 4 hours flight, but we couldn't find any body or any survivors during the mission. I don't know if you could say it's successful or not, but we did that. But I feel like it has a meaning to do that search and rescue mission, because since the disaster happened, we haven't had any search and rescue mission around the coastline and the ocean area, the sea area. So yeah, I think the mission has a meaning.
Yeah.
Of that.
Yeah, despite the fact that, 30 days later that you didn't find any survivors, but it was successful in the sense that you guys went out there and were able to look.
Yeah.
Imagine if there was someone out there and they needed you, you were there. So I really like that you guys made the effort to get out there even in spite of what was happening. You talked about some of the equipment that you were wearing. Can you talk about the equipment you wore on those flights and what that was like?
So as a Coast Guard pilot, I wear a little bit different from the Japanese self-defense force. So we didn't have a lead armor, but we had a fabric protective gear and the life vest and the Geiger counter and the plastic goggle and gas mask. It's maybe not a gas mask, because before the mission, we received the gas mask, but we realized that we cannot use the ICS during the mission with the gas mask. So, yeah, before the mission, we took the lecture from the Nuclear Research Institute or something. Then we asked that, is there without the gas mask, could we do the mission or not? We asked them. They said if you had a wet gas mask, not a dry gas mask, but a wet gas mask, it helps to protect the radioactive. And it's maybe same, you can protect the same amount of the radioactive as a gas mask. So
you're saying gauze mask? Was it fabric like cotton or what was the material?
Fabric. It's it's cotton. I don't know. It's but regular gauze mask.
Gauze. Okay.
So, yeah.
So not restrictive in the way that the gas masks are, but it's still effective in filtering out some of the radioactivity.
But, if you wet, gauze was wet.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a little bit, compared with the cooling emissions equipment, it's not, it's not so protective, right?
Jimmy, let me ask you. So the radiation levels at this point are still, they're decreased, allowing you to fly, but they're still dangerous. Am I right in understanding that?
Yes, still dangerous. Yes. That's why actually the 10 kilometer from the reactor was still restricted area. So we didn't fly over the 10 kilometer, within the 10 kilometer from the nuclear power plant.
But yeah, I imagine with winds and everything else, there's still a lot of radioactivity surrounding that particular area.
Right.
What was the sense? I mean, I'm trying to envision you're using duct tape to fill the cracks and wet cloth mask. I mean, what's your personal thought as you're? I mean, I guess what I'm curious of is what's the rescue sense? I'm going to find someone versus what's the danger to myself here as I'm doing this mission.
Right. I feel very uncomfortable when I saw my equipment, because I know that defense force guys wearing a red armors and gas masks. But people said it's 10 kilometers away from the reactor. And, wind direction was north to south. So should be fine. They said that. Actually, it is fine because I didn't get my Geiger counter didn't have any numbers after the mission. So it is fine. But before that, it was very how to say, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I really worry about my health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned your Geiger counter didn't register any radiation, but did you have any ill effects, any physical effects from flying in that area that you noticed afterwards?
No, actually, no, there are no physical any effect during the mission. But after that, we did a screening, and we did a screening for the helicopter and the cruise. I was exposed during the mission, but my Geiger counter didn't have any number.
But no effects, no headaches, no burning of the
effect,
skin.
no headache. Yeah,
Jimmy, did I read
it is
correct
fine.
though? You did those missions. I think I read in your report. I'm looking for it right now for 3 weeks. Is that correct?
For this mission, it was just one time. So
Okay.
3 weeks for the search and rescue mission, but not nearby the nuclear power plant.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, because for the Fukushima area is just one time. One day.
Gotcha.
And that was a total of 4 hours. Did I hear you right when you said that?
Total 4 hours. Two flight, and 2 hours each. So total was 4 hours.
Okay.
What's the sense as you're flying search and rescue missions for a total of 3 weeks in the whole region, and you don't actually do any rescues? And I'm assuming you're seeing a lot of bodies. I mean, tell me.
Yeah.
What does that do?
Yeah, actually, I saw a lot of bodies in the ocean. So next day of the earthquake, I was dispatched to the Kamaishi area, which is the Iwate prefecture, north side of the Fukushima, north side of Sendai. And then I saw a lot of debris on the ocean. And first body was it was like a Japanese elementary school student wearing the same backpack, having the same backpack. The girls, most of the case, girls are having a red backpack, and the boys are black backpacks. And we found that backpack on the ocean. Our diver carry that backpack, then the body is attached with the backpack. So most of their body doesn't have clothes after tsunami, all naked. I don't know why, but maybe the clothes were swept away from the tsunami or not, but most of the body on the ocean doesn't have any clothes. So it is really difficult to find because it doesn't have and also a lot of debris around the ocean. So it's very difficult to find a body. But find the backpack, the red color backpack, or blue color red backpack is easier. Our area, we found 45 elementary school kids.
Wow.
Because it is easy to find a backpack. So
Yeah.
if you find a backpack, maybe we pick it up and check that. Then most of the cases, the body was attached by the backpack. So yeah, it was nightmare for
I
me.
feel like anything like that surrounding juveniles, young kids, is the hardest to deal with.
Yes.
And young kids aren't supposed to die when they're young, you know. I know that a lot of the difficult calls that I had over the course of my career that I called difficult were difficult because there was a child involved. Drownings were a big part of that for me, but in no comparison at all to what you're describing. Can you talk about some of the mental health resources that were provided for you and your crew in the aftermath of this incident?
Yeah, of course, some of our colleagues was sent back to their air base because of the PTSD. Some of the people had PTSD. You know, yeah, there are a lot of bodies on the ocean, and also the divers is the hardest job because they, carry the body from the ocean to get into the helicopter. So yeah, some of the Coast Guard officers had a PTSD after the disaster. But hardest thing is when we bring the body to the evacuation center is the hardest, because after we landed on the ground, the people were seeing our helicopter. They know that the Coast Guard helicopter didn't carry a survivor. Most of the cases, we bring the body. So they're seeing that. And then after stop the break, some people is there, walked toward to me and asked, who was that? Do you know the name? We don't know the name. We just found the body. So,
Wow.
And I had a chance to talk with one fisherman guy who lost his father during the tsunami. And actually, we found their father and bring to the evacuation center. And then that guy, I think he's 40 or 50 years old, and he's crying, and he looks like almost evenly, but he said thank you to me. Thank you for finding my father. And he said, maybe if you couldn't find my father, I think he's gonna wait for another, 10 years or 20 years until his father was found. And as I said, still in now the 2025, it's 14 years later of the earthquake. We are still missing 2,500 people.
Wow.
And these families are still waiting for the body. So that fisherman guy said, thank you. And I realized that, on that time, honestly, I didn't have much motivation to do that search and rescue mission, because, every day couldn't find any survivors, and they just, find the bodies. The other TV broadcasts said okay, the firefighters found saved 70 people from the isolated area, or other ground self-defense force helicopter found 30 people, and they rescued from the isolated area or something like that. But us, the Coast Guard, we found only a body, and then, we were not broadcasting on the TV or something. But that fisher guy told me that, thank you.
Yeah.
So it means a lot to me that I could have a motivation to do the search and rescue mission.
Yeah.
That's the disaster relief area. So.
The closure that you were able to bring that family, like you described, was so invaluable. I think that's one of the most important parts of the healing process is, I think, that sense of closure. So the fact that you're able to start the healing process for that family is huge. And I think it's interesting when you consider the mortality that took place. I think just because the degrees of separation are so low, everybody knew somebody, I'm sure, that was affected through this. Was there anybody that you knew personally that was swept away, that survived or maybe didn't survive, either from the tsunami or impacted by the earthquake?
Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third-generation Night Sun series high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights.
No, I didn't have. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't have. Yeah, I actually, our colleague, Coast Guard officers, drifted by tsunami, but I didn't know him personally.
Jimmy, I found, and I hope you don't mind if I do this, but I found some quotes from you at the time, and I'm just going to read them because I think it's just so powerful. It says, this is from Jimmy at the time. It says, I continued on the search and rescue mission for 3 weeks, but I could find no survivors. I was seized by the sense of helplessness. And then he goes on, he says, but I believe my actions would help it save people from my country. So I was willing to go do the mission, to include in the restricted area to do my job. So what you're describing is just incredibly powerful. It's such at the heart of what public safety aviation does. So thank you for what you did there and the service for sure.
I think, Terry, what you bring up is 100% true. I think, people in public safety aviation, military aviation, we're doing what we're doing for the greater good of the people we serve. And the story that you're telling, Jimmy, is exactly that. I can imagine the dread almost that I would feel walking to the aircraft knowing that there's probably some bodies I'm going to recover today, not survivors. But you did that every day, and the closure that brought to folks. Again, going back to the fisherman's story, has some immeasurable impact. So yeah, as Terry brought up, thank you for doing that. Thank you for your service. That's something that legacy will live on indefinitely because of the things you did. I want to kind of talk about, well, before I move on, Terry, any kind of closing thoughts there or last questions on that part of it?
No, I just wanted to point that out after the fisherman story, and I'm sure there's maybe more on the mission side of this, but wow, what a powerful story. Even though you didn't rescue anybody, what a powerful story. So
going back to the actual nuclear incident itself, you wrote a paper that was very impactful. A lot of information in the paper you wrote. It was kind of a technical paper. But what I'm curious is, and I think some of this information was contained in the paper, was the comparison between this incident at Fukushima and Chernobyl. Because a lot of people are very familiar with Chernobyl. It's been studied for a long time. Can you talk about some of the differences and similarities between the two incidents?
Yeah, so the Chernobyl accident is back to 1986. So most of the same, it's not caused by tsunami. It's more like a human error because of the accident. But the same situation, like a nuclear power plant had a core meltdown. Because of the core meltdown, the radiation is leaked from the reactor. So both cases, they need to, cool down, or they need to block the radiation from the reactor. So in the Chernobyl case, they use a helicopter as well for their blocking mission. So in the Fukushima case, we dropped the water, but in the Chernobyl, they dropped the sand or lead or clay or neutron absorbing boron from the helicopter. So total is they dropped 5,000 tons of these kind of lead or clays from the helicopter. And they flew over 2,000 times for the mission. Actually, the interesting thing is the protective measure of the Chernobyl is much better than the Fukushima's protective measure. So, yeah, they wear the dust-proof mask and the protective gear and the lead belt and the Geiger counters. And also the helicopter itself has a protective measure from the radioactive things. So on that time, they use a MI8, MI24R, and the MI26. But these helicopters, cabin and the cockpit area was sealed very well. Maybe you can imagine that because they expect to have a nuclear war on that time. It was a Cold War timing. So that's why these helicopter is heavily equipped the protective measure, the radioactive protective measure.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, as a source or a reason why those aircraft may have been better suited, like you said, sealed, the cockpit sealed. The fact that they were preparing for nuclear war drove them to have those protective measures. Whereas the aircraft that you guys were flying weren't Cold War era helicopters. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to what you said in the Chernobyl incident, they dropped sand, lead, clay, and neutron absorbing boron or neutron absorbing boron. Can you talk about, from your knowledge, why only water was dropped on Fukushima? Was it just access to the other things, or was it something else?
On the Fukushima case, because as I told you, like the nuclear fuel was cooling by the water, that reactor. But the Chernobyl case is that there are no pool inside the reactor. I mean, I think they have a pool, but it was destroyed, and there are no chance to have the water inside a cooling pool.
I see.
But in the Fukushima's case, they still have a water pool. So it's much easier to drop the water instead of blocking the reactor itself. And the blocking reactor is a lot of work,
So the water was a much more effective way of cooling. Just
right.
in Chernobyl's case, the pool wasn't there to utilize the water in the way that it was at Fukushima.
Right. So Chernobyl case is the pool was already destroyed, and they have a more massive explosion at the reactor area. So there are a lot of damage on the reactor area. So couldn't store the water.
Yeah.
At the Chernobyl case. That's my understanding.
Terry, do you have a question? It looked like you had something.
No, I'm fascinated. I was going to make a comment. John, you've alluded to it, but Jimmy wrote a lengthy research paper on this disaster, on the Chernobyl disaster, from a helicopter rescue perspective, and the protocols that are in place and not in place. And although that these are rare incidents, they're incredibly dangerous incidents that we need to be prepared for. And Jimmy, I give you kudos because you not only brought closure and did what you did there, but you continued that mission on to try to affect the future, with the lessons learned. And if anybody ever gets a chance to read that paper, it's fascinating to read some of the stuff you came up with. My question is this: I don't know if I want to ask this, but I'm going to. What has happened since then? I mean, are there protocols in place? Is there, better safety measures that in place in case that next incident happens? Where are we today?
Yes, we established like a manual for in the case of having a nuclear disaster. So we did have before the earthquake, but we revised with a new based on our experience from the Fukushima power plant accident. So now we have a lot of many more information to protect the crew and also the workers from the nuclear disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And also we have a new gas mask. It has a new, it has a not binocular, but more like monocular types, and that you can see them. You can keep more view from the cockpit, and also that gas mask has a mic inside the cartridge, so that you can talk to the other crews during the mission. So we developed that kind of new equipment as well.
What do you think the biggest lesson learned was for yourself and your agency as far as a response to this incident?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Their biggest learning is, on that time, back to the 2011 We didn't expect that kind of accident, but it has, it happens actually. So next 20 years or next 30 years, of course, I hope we're not going to have that kind of disaster again, but we need to prepare for that, I think. It's not because of the tsunami or nuclear power plant accident. Maybe it could be the nuclear war as well, right?
Yeah.
So the knowledge, we need to know that. We need to know how to protect and how to survive from that kind of like a nuclear disaster or nuclear accident or nuclear war. Maybe we should know that at least lead panel or lead armor or water amount of like a water wall or something like that. We could protect. We could use these kind of protective measure for the nuclear disaster. If you know that kind of knowledge, maybe something happened. Maybe you can use that kind of like knowledge.
As you brought up, we're not going to stop having natural disasters, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, forest fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, all the things that typically require emergency response. That's not going to ever stop. So it's important for us to learn from these types of incidents and to think and talk about as air crews, as organizations, how do we respond to these things? How do we take the lessons that have been learned and apply these to future incidents? These kind of conversations, Jimmy, like you're willing to come on and have with us today are very fruitful and beneficial for the folks that are in a position that may find themselves responding to either a nuclear disaster or it could be in Southern California, a giant earthquake. You think about operating in an area with no electricity, no radio communications or limited communications. How do you do that? I think it's important for us to have these table talk conversations on how do we do this effectively before something happens, so that when something does happen, we're not scratching our heads trying to figure out how to do our job. Terry, I'm curious for you in Arizona, being the commander of the program there, how did you guys kind of walk through or prepare for some natural disaster type incidents?
It's fascinating, John. I think what you're speaking to is, prepare for the unknown and thinking outside the box, because we don't know what that unknown is. I just want to make a comment before I directly answer that. Jimmy in his paper made reference to Japan being the only country in the world that's actually had nuclear bombs dropped on them and the radiation fallout. And I think you mentioned 48 nuclear power plants in Japan. We normally don't think this grand of, prepare for the unknown, but oh my gosh. I mean, I live, 25 miles away from a nuclear power plant. I'm curious what we have planned for that from an airborne aviation perspective. Would we be prepared to drop that water to have lead protection, as Jimmy talks about, and some of these other protective measures? In Arizona, we admittedly did not look at that grand of a scale, and we absolutely should. It was more so, if this river floods, if this wash, more on what we see day to day. But boy, what a lesson learned in preparing for the big events as well that Jimmy and this paper teaches us.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word, because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is responder. Visit contest.verticalhelicast.com to enter the buzzword.
It's hard to, like you said, prepare for the unknowns, because you don't know what you don't know, and there's so many different things that could possibly happen. But I think the simple things like fires, hurricanes, those types of events, flooding, those things, when the nuts and bolts are talked about and developed for those, can be extrapolated and applied on a larger scale, like a mass casualty incident. So just, I think having starting those conversations is important. Having them, on an annual basis, if not more frequent, I think is valuable. So again, Jimmy, thank you for taking time out of your schedule out of your Saturday. You know, we didn't bring that up. It's Friday here for Terry and I, and it's Saturday morning for you. So you're giving up your Saturday morning to sit here and talk with us. We're very thankful.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah. On that, Terry, any closing thoughts or last topics you'd like to tackle before we walk out?
You know, John, I think we covered them. The lessons learned on this, the human side of it. I'm amazed, and I know I've said this numerous times, but I'm amazed around the world, the commonalities that we have in this business. You know, the protection of lives, the bringing of closure, the sense of duty, you know, that Jimmy spoke of in his case, and the need to prepare for the future. I mean, it's amazing what we have in common around the world and the Jimmys of the world, so to speak. So I just will echo again a thank you to Jimmy for taking the time to share the story, such a meaningful, impactful story. And I would encourage your listeners, John, if you find this paper, it's worth a read for sure that Jimmy provided to us.
Yeah, if we can, we'll try and make that paper available. If Jimmy has a way of sharing that, reach out to us. We'll make that happen. But Terry, I just want to touch on something you brought up, how similar we are, you know, worldwide. And you think that whatever problem you're dealing with at your agency is isolated to your one agency, your one region. You know, leadership and safety are the two things that come up very often. You think it might be isolated to your place or your region. Well, you have these conversations globally, and you see, no, it's very prevalent. We all have the same problems. That's why I really love these international conversations, because we can all learn from each other. We can all collectively come up with solutions and ways of making our industry better than trying to come up with these solutions to problems ourselves. So again, it comes down to finding folks like Jimmy who are willing to take time out of their schedule and talk to us about the things that they experience, the positive and the negative, you know, and we learn from both for sure. So Jimmy, I'll thank you again. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your service. Look forward to seeing you at an event at some point. I really, really want to get to Japan. It's actually a bucket list thing for me to do. So if I can make it over there, I'd love to see you in person and say hello.
Sure.
And it's been an honor. Jimmy, for you, any last thoughts or closing words?
Yeah, thank you very much for having a time this event, and thank you very much for understanding about the Japanese. We had a hard time on the earthquake, but it could happen again, and also I just want to say that during the disaster relief mission, the U.S. military helps us a lot. We call the Tomodachi mission, and they support a lot of things, and they did a lot of help. They help us a lot. So I just want to say thank you for the Americans. Thank you very much. Yeah, we really appreciate that.
So we recently had our friend Scott Kellerman on. He's one of our vertical photographer, videographers. He's a U.S. Coast Guard pilot, and he was actually stationed in Japan when that took place. So he responded and insisted out there, and he had some really interesting stories as well. And I guess the one more question I'll ask, and we didn't really talk about it a lot, but Scott talked about it a little bit, was after these missions are flown, and these aircraft go back to the base, and maintenance staff is now tasked with decontaminating these aircraft. Can you talk about some of the measures that the maintenance folks undertook to decontaminate the aircraft?
Okay. We use after the screening, they use a water shower, just the water, just regular water, pure water, and they just wash the helicopter. My case was that's it. And about the cooling missions aircraft, like a Chinook, they clean up after the cleanup, they store the hangar and keep away from the aircraft for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But my helicopter was not so long, just washed by the water. But the interesting thing is which part of the helicopter do you know which part of the helicopter had the highest radioactive?
I would say maybe the leading edge of the cross tubes.
Yeah, cross tube is middle. Yeah, cross.
the nose and the leading edge of the rotor blades?
No. Yeah.
No.
Actually, the blade of the leading part is the second highest. The number one is the cooling fan. Yeah, behind the engine. The Bell 212 has like a cooling fan. Engine cooler. Yeah, engine cooler.
So that had the highest
That's
level.
the highest. Yeah. Those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, you'd think, like Terry said, the leading edge of the rotor system would be most exposed. Interesting that you guys found the most exposure in those cooling fans. Terry, anything to throw in there on that?
It makes perfect sense. What he just described. It's I would have never thought of that. The intakes of the engine and whatnot. So, John, I will add. I made mention of our commonalities, and what I was going to say, we speak the same language in that regard. But I want to say this and I also made mention that Jimmy's trying to teach me Japanese. I'm not very good, but I want to say this to Jimmy in Jimmy's language. So I'm going to totally butcher it. So I'm going to have to translate it afterwards. But it's so gomen nasai, watashi wa nihongo ga haramasen. And arigato gozaimasu. What I think I said was, Jimmy, I'm sorry that I still don't speak good English, but thank you for helping me. You can correct me later, Jimmy.
Yeah, my case is today was super nervous for me, and this is the first time having interview types of the radio record. So it's after that, I have realized that it's very difficult for me. I prepared some materials, but it's not a presentation. Presentation is much easier. More like the conversation types of the recording is much difficult for me. I just realized it. So sorry for my English.
No, you did a great job. And again, thank you for taking the time to prepare for this, the time to sit here and talk with us and to share your knowledge. So on that, thank you for joining the Hangar Z podcast, and look forward to catching you soon. And Terry, we'll see you at AppsCon here coming up. So until then,
I look forward to it.
We'll catch you later. Cheers. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com. Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third-generation Night Sun series, high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights.
Thank you for joining us in this powerful episode of the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. Today, we heard incredible stories from Jimmy Sagane, an experienced rescue helicopter pilot whose journey was shaped by witnessing a rescue as a child and who directly experienced the harrowing events of Japan's 2011 earthquake and tsunami. From the challenges of international rescue efforts and the complex operations during the Fukushima disaster, to the courage required to fly in difficult conditions, Jimmy's experiences highlight the resilience and dedication of public safety aviation professionals. These takeaways highlight the importance of continuous learning, preparedness, and innovation in our field. lessons that save lives and shape the future of aviation rescue operations.